every big idea in the Silicon Valley and for every ground-taking initiative and innovation, it's the money man, the man with the money bags that counts. And which is why we've decided to put the spotlight on this edition of the show on the venture capitalists, the guys who've really made it big from India. My guest today is a serial entrepreneur and an investor. He co-founded Jungly in 1996, which was sold to Amazon. He then co-founded Cosmix, which got sold to Walmart. He also co-founded early-stage VC fund Cambrian Ventures. Amongst the seed capitals are the firms that he invested in is Facebook and Snapdeal. And the most fascinating nugget about the man is he actually had a chance to buy Google twice over in the 1990s, but he decided not to. It is indeed a pleasure to be speaking to Anand Rajaraman, founder of Milliways Ventures.
You know, everybody here is, of course, super excited that that Prime Minister Modi is going to be here. He's, been to the East Coast, but he's never visited Silicon Valley.
That's right.
And of course, the startup scene in India is booming, and there's a lot of cross-border activity there. So I think, all this is a nice backdrop for the Prime Minister's visit. I don't know whether specifically this will result in anything, but I think it's just a nice context for the Prime Minister's visit here.
As someone who has the advantage of being a global insider, that's what I call people like yourselves. You've been in India, you know the atmosphere there, you know what it takes to do business there, and now somebody who really wears that global hat, who invests in companies all over the world, specifically in the US and in India. How long will it be before India can have its own Silicon Valley? I mean, the kind of ecosystem that's required for a Silicon Valley-like culture. What are the enablers and challenges as far as India is concerned?
I think some of that is happening already. Frankly, I was just in India and I just came back, and I go every few months, and every few months when I go and I come back, I can see the changes that are happening in India, and I can see more and more of a startup culture emerging in India. Just to give you an example, right? I was at my alma mater, IIT Madras, 2.5 years ago, and I gave a talk about entrepreneurship to an audience of several hundred students, and I asked them, how many of you want to be entrepreneurs? And 2 hands went up in the audience out of several hundred students.
And that number has gone up.
Yeah, and now if when I do go back again now, and I ask people, almost every hand in the audience goes up. Right now, there's probably a little bit of froth in the valuations of companies as well, especially when you see some of these companies that are raising money at over $1 billion valuations in India. I think some of that is probably a little bit overblown. The market's not quite there yet. So I do worry a little bit that what happens when there's a correction. Will these companies, will they all make it through it? Will there be a crunch and the inevitable disappointment that happens when when there's a slowdown?
Well, so much gets written and said about the e-commerce space, the consumer internet space in India, from somebody who's really put their money where it matters. Do you believe India is a market that's ready for an Amazon, a Snapdeal, a Flipkart, a Jabong, for that matter?
I definitely believe there's going to be consolidation in the space in the long run. But that said, I think the Indian retail economy in India is largely unorganized, right? The organization is at the tip of the iceberg, and I think there's room for a lot of players to organize this economy. I sort of think that there's a good chance for India to kind of leapfrog the physical retail era and move a lot of stuff to move directly to online. Right, so there's a lot of unorganized physical retail. Right. There's a lot of organized physical retail, and there's e-commerce. I think the e-commerce might leapfrog some of the organized physical retail as stuff moves from the unorganized to the organized sectors.
You spoke about the billion-dollar valuations. Some of them perhaps not justified. It could be a bubble in the making. One needs to watch out against that. But the fact that the government is talking a lot, even at the policy level, of starting up, of venture capitalists, they're talking about entrepreneurship. Is that space really somewhere where the government should look at? Is that space somewhere where policy intervention is required? Or is being an entrepreneur actually comes to people naturally, and with successful stories like yourselves, people will follow that model?
Well, in terms of policy intervention, I think my overall feeling is, less intervention is better. But I think there are some enabling things that the government can do. For example, simplify the tax structure through a goods and services tax, which sort of regularizes this mess of local octroys and various kind of state taxes, which will remove a lot of friction from e-commerce and various. Basically.
They're still actually grappling with how to tax e-commerce right now.
Well, yes. I think that the issue is the following, right? there's a lot of interstate commerce in India that's not happening today because of a mess of arcane regulations and tax issues and so on, right? By simplifying the tax structure and creating something like a GST, I think that will unlock a lot of commerce potential by enabling even small players to participate in interstate commerce, right? So that's huge. And things like land acquisition, of course, will work for a lot of industries, right?
What are the 3 things that you would advise startups in India to stay away from, to be wary of?
I think the most important thing I tell, if I just think of one thing, the most important thing I tell every entrepreneur I meet with is to be very, very selective about hiring. Just to hire just the A and
just
A
the bare
plus
minimum.
And just hire really top-notch, what I call A or A plus people. Don't hire when you're in a startup, especially in a competitive environment, and talent is scarce, you have to get things done.
Right.
It's very, very tempting to just hire somebody and put them in their place to get the job done. When you're hiring the first 10, 15, 20 people, be super selective and hire just the top A plus people, even if it takes a long time, and even if you have to pay a lot. We have this saying in Silicon Valley that one A plus person is equal to 10 B people.
My next guest on the show is a man who is the managing director of Menlo Ventures, one of the oldest VC firms in the Valley. It, of course, has Uber as one of its investments in the portfolio. He's a believer in the consumer and the enterprise space and is specifically excited about what he calls the right now economy. Venky Ganeshan right here on ET Now.
I am long-term bullish on India. India has a huge demographical advantage. The percentage of young people in our population is the highest of any big country out there, and we have the demographic dividend. But what we need to do is a couple of things. One, we need to make sure that our digital infrastructure is world-class.
That's right.
Today, when I look at data rates in India and the ability to get the cost of data and the cost of spectrum, that's too high. The government can make a big change by enabling Indians to have the best access to broadband, both wired as well as mobile data. And I think that is a multiplier to society. And then I think we need to streamline and make our laws consistent with entrepreneurship. Today, our laws still, as much change as Mr. Modi has made, still reflect more a license Raj than a startup Raj. We need to figure out how to make our laws resulting in a startup Raj.
You also mentioned something which was very interesting, and coming from you, it should carry a lot of weight. You said the entrepreneur or the startup community in India is still almost like a license Raj. It is not buzzing with action as much as it would. I mean, it doesn't have the blooming environment, so to say. What are the things that the government needs to do as far as, the whole startup, stand-up India initiative is concerned? It's a great slogan. Nobody denies that. But do you believe it can be reduced to being just a rhetoric?
So the irony is, India is the most entrepreneurial country in the world.
That's right.
Everywhere
Look at
I
people
go,
like yourselves.
Well, not me. I'm little, but I look back and I see my pawn wala, my vegetable wala. Those people are real entrepreneurs. They give in. What is holding us back is in India, we have too many rules, too many laws. I did a thought experiment once. I tried to start a company in India where I tried to follow all the rules. I could not. In fact, so many rules contradict each other that you actually could not follow the rules.
So you're almost an outlaw by being...
Everyone is an outlaw who is a lawful person. Let's not make new rules. Rather, let's just enforce the rules we have and free Indians. You know what? The reason why Indians are successful in Silicon Valley is we're the same people who left India. Is because it's free. We can actually do stuff together. If we can free up the economy, India is going to blossom in a way that no one even expects.
Venky, I want you to put, you wear two hats. You wear the hat of an entrepreneur and you wear the hat of the venture capitalist who actually puts their money where it matters. I want you to wear both your hats and dissect the Indian startup scene for me. There's plenty of money that's chasing startups. We're completely talking all the time about the billion-dollar babies that are coming up in India. Does this bother you that we're actually seeing a big bubble in the making?
Yeah, so let me say, long-term, very bullish on India. I think India is going to create multiple billion-dollar companies. Short-term, we are in a bubblish environment. There are a small number of companies who have raised a lot of money in India. Some of them are very good companies, but some of them are burning money, gross margin negative. They're going to bust. And when it busts, it's not going to be pretty. But I want people to know that the long-term story of India is very much intact. What we need to figure out is not how we can put lots of money in a small number of companies, but how can we put a small amount of money in a large number of companies so that we can have 1,000 flowers bloom. look at the 4 biggest companies in China, Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba, Xiaomi. They pretty much have 99% of their revenues from China.
That's right.
So what China has successfully done is build a model where you can create $1 billion or $100 billion companies just servicing the Chinese market. We need to have that mindset. And I think one of our challenges, blessing and a curse, is because Indians grew up in a Western environment, comfortable with English, we try to go global without winning local.
No.
We need to make our local markets interesting. We need to make sure that we make them first for India before we go global. Second, yes, there's not enough innovation. I mean, Indians don't lack for talent. You know, 1/3 of the companies Menlo Ventures invest have Indian founders. But when I look at the companies in India, the innovation is not there. It's much more services orientation as opposed to product orientation.
Right.
That's not true with the younger generation. I know for sure that the younger generation of India are capable of creating world-class products. Now we need to make sure we can get the capital and the laws in place to enable them to succeed.
It's an interesting point that you brought about, that we went global without actually going local first. An obvious question comes to my mind, and this is really on the demand side scenario, what you call the right now economy. So a lot of the consumer internet spaces or the companies that operate in that space in India are really riding on that wave, and consumers of course are spoiled for choice. They're not complaining. But what happens to companies and models like these or consumer demand like that when these funding taps stop?
So I think you have to draw a distinction.
Is there going to be a crash landing there, you think?
Well, you got to draw a distinction between services that are actually have fundamentally economically sound. So you look at an Uber, which I know is in India, or an Ola cab. Those businesses fundamentally make sense. How do we know it? Look at Uber's success in America, and you can see that in America, they actually, are very successful in creating a positive economic business. And then there are businesses where you're giving a rupee for 99 cents.
That's right.
Okay, those fundamentally businesses scaling those businesses is not going to help you because you're losing money on every transaction.
That's right.
So that's why I got to draw the distinction between the two. Businesses in which you're giving away a rupee for 99 paise, they don't
Not
succeed.
happening, yes.
But you can invest and take losses in businesses like Amazon and Uber because long term they create a tremendous amount of value.
Is there a startup in India that's caught your eye recently, a particular space that you would want to invest in? And an obvious question comes to my mind, at any point going forward, will a fund focused on India be anywhere on your radar? And if not, what are the factors you will not look at a fund focused on India?
So, multiple questions. So,
Yes.
start out with startups. I'm really excited about a company that we are involved in called Gupshup.
Yeah, that's right.
So Gupshup actually is like the Twilio of India. They do the infrastructure for messaging, really focus on business-to-business messaging. So they're kind of like Slack and Twilio put together.
Right.
So that's a great example of amazing entrepreneurs, great progress, and meaningful scale. While it's wonderful to talk about Flipkart, Ola, Snapdeal, those are great companies, I think we need to equally talk about the next great Indian enterprise company.
Right.
And especially in security, is super important. I think we are waiting for the rhetoric of startup India to actually match the laws and the regulations. And the minute we do that, we are going to be in. We are big believers in India.
He's the product engineering lead at Square, one of the hottest things that's happening in the payment space. But he's no stranger to the Silicon Valley. He's driven ads previously in very high-profile jobs at Facebook and Google. And of course, he's an angel investor himself, eyeing the right opportunity to fund some startups. My guest today, a very special Gokul Rajaram. Thanks very much for being with us, Gokul. It's
Thanks,
a pleasure.
Supriya.
And like you say, make commerce easy. We're meeting in the context of the Prime Minister's visit. This is his first visit to the Valley, and many people believe it's historic because it's, he's the second only Indian Prime Minister to travel all this way. Shining stars like yourselves have done a lot of good to the Indian name. But in that context, what does this visit really mean as far as the Silicon Valley or India itself is concerned?
Yeah. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that this is the most eagerly anticipated visit by any Indian leader ever to the Valley. If you look at the anticipation that's been building up to crescendo, which will hopefully culminate over the next few days, it's tremendous. I think there are three reasons for it. First, I would call it hope. The Valley always thinks of technology and technology-enabled solutions as being something that can really change humanity, can drive society for the better. And Prime Minister Modi's visit shows that he is ready and excited to embrace the technology industry in the Valley. So we are all very hopeful and optimistic. There's a sign that that's going to happen. The second reason is celebration. Over the last few months, we've seen Indian leaders are sent to the top roles in many of the top technology companies, valley companies. And it's again, he's arriving at a special time where the Indian community here is celebrating that Indians can actually go and lead these companies. So I think really celebratory moment here.
You know, amidst all the celebration, you know, there is also this whole phrase Digital India being celebrated. It's one of the pillars of his own governance, like he said. He wants a lot of e-initiatives to happen. He wants governance to happen by the e-route and all of that. But in terms of making it a pillar of governance, what do you think are some of the things that the government of India needs to do, hasn't done so far, and what are some of the things that it needs to be wary of? In your own space, Digital India has a lot of scope, it has a lot of impact, but for it to be really the success that it's envisaged to be, what should it be done?
Let me tell you a story. I heard about this story a couple of weeks ago. It's a startup called Banyan Nation in India. And what these guys are doing is they're trying to really solve one of the mounting crises that face India, which is a garbage crisis.
Oh, that's right.
They're using technology, they're using smartphones, SMS messaging, etc., to give to the raddiwalas, the kabadiwalas, to help them figure out how to get rid of the middlemen, improve their living, but at the same time, bring more process to the process of collecting garbage, to recycling it, etc.
Right.
So they're doing good for society, but also they are building a compelling business. But what is interesting here is not the fact that they're using technology to solve the problem, but it's the fact that it was founded by two Indian engineers who said, you know what, this is a crisis, I'm not going to just sit here, I'm going to start a company.
That's right.
And
so the ideation happened by the crisis that it threw
exactly.
up. Yes,
so what we need is for the government to recognize, to do two things. One, enable access to technology. Enable access to technology right from childhood.
Right.
People have access to inexpensive technology, smartphones and tablets. But second, get rid of the rules, the regulations, the red tape, the bureaucracy that are holding back the entrepreneurial talent of 1 billion plus Indians. The government, I don't think, needs to remove rules as much as it needs to encourage all the agencies to embrace innovation.
Right.
And so tenders that are 2.5 years now open, which with the mandate of using technology, still unable to because they feel nervous about embracing technology and change. If you look at the Valley, it's not about government intervention, it's about government giving access to technology and then stepping out of the way.
The obvious question that comes to my mind is that you pioneer, I mean, you know, the whole payment space in the US is being pioneered by your company, pioneered by people like yourselves. Do you see a Square coming out of India?
So Square's mission, which I'm very excited about, which you guys filmed there, is making commerce easy. It is to remove friction in every interaction between the buyer and the seller. I think one of the most interesting things we're seeing emerging in India, which is similar, is the emergence of the digital wallet, where people are able to load money very easily and with frictionless ways transact on both online websites and mobile apps. But with digital wallets, India could potentially leapfrog the whole credit card infrastructure and go to e-payments, digital payments, before any other country in the world.
In the last 2 weeks, we've seen e-wallets being launched by companies like a Snapdeal or Vinod Khosla for that matter. So, you know, the e-tail battle is really shifting to the e-wallet. Is the market ready for a battle like that? And are you going to see more of these emerge?
I personally think it's great when there's competition because the ultimate winner is the consumer.
That's right. Yes.
And so I think it is going to be, ultimately retail is won based on three things: price, convenience, and selection. And what is interesting in mobile is adds a fourth dimension, which is ease of use and removing friction. So even though ease of use and removing friction is important, I don't think just having the e-wallet is going to be the decider. I think what is going to be important is price, selection, and convenience.
Is the two-step authentication in India a hindrance for a Square-like company to come up out of there? Is that a challenge? Because, you know, there are obviously regulatory hurdles around a one-step authentication, and which is why you have a two-step. I mean, Uber went through trouble in that space. Is that a hindrance of sorts?
I think it's a necessary thing because that's how gets people who are not comfortable with using cards, with using electronic payments to get comfortable.
To encourage.
But the great news is with biometric authentication, which means the next generation of phones are going to be able to use your fingerprint to authenticate you. They know that the person who's paying via this phone is this person. So someone can't pick up your phone and pay because you need to authenticate it via your fingerprint. So you won't need those kinds of things anymore as new authentication technologies come about. So I think it's a stepping stone to the future, but necessary stepping stone.
How will you assess the startup scene in India? There are two views to that. Some people believe it's buzzing with action, and other people believe it's a huge bubble in the making that one needs to be wary of. Which side of the two debates will you throw your coin over?
As with everything, there is always truth to both.
That's right.
And there's gray area. I think, unlike 10 years ago, when there were a lot of companies that were started which were overhyped and overvalued, which didn't have fundamental business models, this new crop of companies has a real strong potential at becoming a true game-changing company because they have true business models, and most importantly, they have founders. The quality of founders in India has just 10x'd over the last 5 years. So every founder I meet, just the way they think, how ambitious they are, how unconstrained, how unshackled they are, even compared to my generation 20 years ago. It's been amazing.
A lot of the good startups in India, many people believe, are mental models of the Western success stories. Do you see a mental model of startup in India? Many people believe EastApp perhaps is a close connect to be made.
I don't think so. I think now the reality is, if you think about almost any startup, they fulfill, or any successful company, they're fulfilling a primal need of people. Buying things is a primal need. You can't say it's a Western invented thing. Just because Amazon was invented first, that doesn't mean it has a lock on retail.
That's right.
Everyone needs to buy things. What is happening in India is companies like Snapdeal and Flipkart are completely reinventing what commerce means in an Indian context.
That's right. Yeah.
And so just because they're doing commerce doesn't mean, I think, you can accuse them of aping Western models. They are taking commerce, which is a fundamental human need, and coming at it from a completely different lens. In some cases, they are taking on logistics. Amazon had USPS and UPS to rely on to ship goods. These guys don't have that. They're essentially trying to see if they can do logistics all the way to the end customer. So I don't believe that at all. I think they're looking at fundamental human needs, travel, housing, commerce, and reinventing them from the ground up.
My obvious question has to be about an India-China comparison. No interview is over unless you talk about the two countries in the same breath. So the obvious question on the India-China story is that, as far as the payment ecosystem is concerned, what parallels can India draw from China? I mean, how different or unique are the two markets from each other? And are there obvious parallels that can be drawn?
Yeah. I think the biggest parallel I draw is that on the consumer side, there is massive innovation, and commerce and payments are really tied together. So I think the rise of digital wallets is going to parallel what happened with Alipay, which is the dominant payment mechanism in China. And I don't think we've seen the Alipay of India emerge, but I think once the Alipay of India emerges, that could really supplant how people think about paying, not just online, but in the offline context. Alipay is literally a bank, a payment mechanism, both online and offline. It's the entire value chain. It is the entire value chain. So I think we need companies in India that are somewhat like thinking in that direction and really thinking how to reinvent not just payments but financial services.
Precisely.
Because I think financial services in India are still 2-3 decades old, and they need to be reinvented along with payments.
I'll ask you a completely disconnected question to all of this. You know, Indian banking space is moving to a more differentiated model. I wonder if you read this stuff. You know, you had your big banks, the public sector, the private sector ones. They moved to payment banks. They're now talking about small banks. Is that an obvious evolution in the cycle of, in the evolution cycle of any financial services industry? Do you see more and more of that happen in India, or are there obvious risks that come with it?
I think the biggest evolution is going to be when you don't need to visit a bank branch to open a bank account.
Right.
Because think about it, in most cases people visit the bank branch but then do everything else online.
That's right.
So why can't I just download an app and open a bank account without ever seeing a person? And when a company can do that, and I think that's where you need regulation. That's where you need maybe freeing up of regulation, where you can actually have virtual banks that people can open a bank account without ever visiting a bank branch. And that's when I think you'll really see financial services explode.
I want you to now wear your angel investor hat, and you do that a lot. You've invested in LiveSpace. Obviously, that's an exciting space in India. But are there other spaces, other industries, other sectors that obviously excite you on your radar?
I think healthcare is one that really excites me. Just because there's an opportunity to transform healthcare to technology. Even the remotest villager can access doctors through face-to-face video conferencing and help them and ask them for help. So I invested in a company called Liberate, which was ironically started by a former Facebook colleague of mine who moved to India, which is around helping doctors and patients communicate. Education is the other thing I'm really passionate about. I think if, again, like I said, if you give every child access to a smartphone or a tablet, they can access, you're changing lives. So I think there are fundamental, I believe in companies that, and I think those are the biggest companies and they can do the most good, companies that reinvent the way people live.
Gokul, how do you assess the Indian startup scene? Is there too much money that's chasing too few companies? 80% of the funding that's coming in is only going to about 20-odd companies there. Is there too much capital that has kind of corrupted that space? How do you assess it from those 2 points of view?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of capital coming in at the later stages. I think there is still a reluctance amongst the Indian venture community to take bets on people. They still want to see, for example, the Liberate founder. he found that many of the investors he talked to, he was just the highest quality funder I can think of. I committed money to him even before he was thinking of his idea.
Right.
When he talked to investors, they all wanted to see, what's your business model? Show us that you're making money, versus saying, what are you doing to change the world?
Right.
And I think once there's revenue, everyone says we'll invest. So there's a lot of money chasing that. But there's not enough money chasing
the innovation, the idea.
Innovation, the idea. So I think there's an opportunity to actually go and find funders who want to change the world, who are literally willing to drop out of IIT or leave Facebook to do that, or leave Google to do that, and invest in those
It's interesting to speak to one of those people here. I have a last question to ask of you. At any stage, will you look at an India-focused fund to operate? Is that something that's on your radar? Considering you did say, it's not just about the American dream, it's about the Indian dream. There's a Bangalore, there's a Delhi, there's a Bombay that's kind of buzzing with action now.
Never say never. I think for the next few years, I'm really excited at Square, but definitely it's something I want to continue doing, and I want to continue investing. And I feel very strongly that the Indian ecosystem, it has this interesting place where, with support from us in the Valley and with support from investors in India, it can really rival the Valley ecosystem and some of the other big ecosystems. I'm really excited to help support them.
Gokul, with all of its smartness, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.